If you see your spouse or your child, whoever it is, upset and emotional, give them some space. And I think that's important. We forget to talk about that other person in the room. Sometimes we're always like, just take a break, walk away and think about it.
Hello and welcome to the Julia Gino Podcast. My name is Gino Barbaro, one of the co-founders of Barbaro 360, a company that is changing the world one family at a time. And with me today, as always, is my beautiful wife, Julia Barbaro.
I'm here.
Baby, how are we doing?
Excellent, thank you.
Excellent.
You're sweating already.
I had a rough day
This topic is stressing you out, I feel.
Yeah, and the reason why this topic is stressing me out is I have something called PTSD. I think about when my parents went through this several years ago. I'll go through the story as the podcast starts to develop. But today we have Emily Bouchard. She's a nationally recognized family wealth coach with over 2 decades of experience helping families navigate the emotional side of money, legacy, and inheritance. Emily has been featured in the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, and CNN for her work guiding high net worth families through values-based planning. Emily brings heart and expertise to every conversation, helping parents and grandparents build stronger connections and create legacies that last. She's the author of Beginner's Guide to Purposeful Prenups and Estate Planning for the Blended Family. Welcome to the show, Emily.
Oh, thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah.
And first thing is, this is Julia, not Jake. I know you got confused before you heard Jake. She's a little bit better looking than Jake.
Jake's a good looking guy.
Yeah, but Emily.
Shorter hair though.
I could start with the story of why I really wanted to get you on. And if you don't mind me doing that, and then you can dovetail right into it. Because for me, back in 2007, my dad passed away. But I remember it was in August of 2007. I remember in July of 2007, we were at my mom's house. The priest was there giving last rites, and the accountant was there doing the trust work. And my mom was in a complete daze, and if she couldn't make decisions at that point. It was too late. They were setting up an irrevocable trust, and it was just took them too long. They waited too long. There's 2 things that happened that I thought that were really unfortunate. The first one is she didn't have the opportunity to grieve my dad. After he passed away, she's in that stress. And then in 2020, we ended up selling the asset that had the irrevocable trust, the assets were in there. She kept that open for a couple of more years. And I think, ironically, she didn't want to let that go because it had the name of the trust and she couldn't close the chapter on that part of her life. And I think if she had taken time and done it a little bit beforehand and planned it out, things maybe emotionally would have been a little bit different. I don't know. Have you experienced that in your practice before?
Oh, yeah, the emotions that happen. So many people put off estate planning because they don't want to face their mortality. And then they wait too long. And then, if they have a chance to do it at the last minute, that can be super stressful. And it's so traumatic. And then there's sometimes when somebody passes away suddenly and you don't have that chance to do that. And then it becomes even more stressful. Your state determines where the distribution or the disposition will be instead of what maybe you and your spouse would have wanted it to be. So it's definitely the case. And I'm so sorry that your family went through that. And I hope that you have come on the other side of it now. That's really hard.
It does take a little while. And usually I like to start off by asking questions on the podcast, but I see my wife quickly scribbling something down. So when she gets into that, she's got questions. Usually she's like estate planning, business. I'm not going to touch that. But I saw a little bit of excitement there. Yeah. Share with us.
No, I'm excited for this because I think this is a topic that a lot of people just put off. And we wait. And we were just talking about a younger man who passed away this past week, in the 40s and with young children. And you don't think about it because you're young, you're healthy. We also try to eat healthy and all this stuff. And we don't think, okay, well, that will eventually happen to me at some point. I'm going to just put that off. And some people just don't think about it. Not that they're putting it off. They forget about it, estate planning. And so that's why it's exciting to talk about it.
Do you have any questions? Specifically, what's on your mind?
I want to know, give the listeners an idea of what you do and who do you help?
Yeah, thanks. Because I want to be really clear. I am not a lawyer. I am not a financial advisor. I'm a social worker. And so my work is about helping people come to clear understanding within themselves about what they want the outcomes to be for their estate plan, for the transition of their wealth, for their marriage, right? So starting out with a prenup or all the way to the estate plan. And when somebody passes away, there's so many decisions that need to be made that have dramatic impact on people's lives. And anything I can do to have couples and families be really strong, cohesive, related to the assets and the good fortune that they have, the better. And it just feels really fulfilling to me to be able to do that in people's people's lives.
Love that.
Why do so many families struggle to talk about openly about money? And how can they begin? How can they start talking about money?
Yeah, it's interesting. It's kind of like the last taboo, right? And there's so much around it. There's a lot of emotion that's wrapped up in money, right? We use it every day. We're constantly having to make decisions related to it. And things historically are not necessarily modeled for us in terms of how to have really great, effective conversations about money. And then we have different patterns of relating to money. Like some people are more risk takers and some people are more avoidant and some people are more, security first. And you need to be able to manage and maneuver with those different approaches with each other where they're all valid as opposed to one being right and one being wrong. And that's something I really help people understand is how to respectfully engage with everybody's personality around money and temperament around money and the emotional state around it too, so that they can have better conversations and have them be healthier. And it's not an easy thing, but it is something you can learn how to do.
What's the most common issue, common question people ask you, or even, what's the number one family issue that you're noticing working with people?
Well, family issue that where I work in the space of where people have built up an estate, right, that could be taxable, like there's significant assets in it, or they have a family business where they have an identity that's related to the business. Maybe their name is on it, or maybe it was started by a grandfather and it's, part of the community. There's so many different ways. There's a family identity related to family money. And the biggest question that happens is not wanting to talk about it, not wanting to do the planning in an inclusive way because of not wanting to have to deal with either entitlement coming through, like not wanting the kids to think that they are going to have this or presuming, and then also not wanting to rob them of their volition in the world. They're showing up for themselves and their careers and what they can do and make them in the world. And yet they're being raised in a level of affluence and a level of expectation about what life is like that you need to give them the skills to handle it. So I like the analogy of if you move to France and you only raise your kids speaking English and in English-speaking schools, and then when they turn 18 or 25, you're like, okay, go out there and be successful in France. You haven't really helped them over time develop a fluency in that area. And so that's the biggest issue is helping parents feel really comfortable and confident in terms of how to build their children's competencies related to their financial lives so that they're contributing members of society. They really have a healthy relationship with money and they understand the value of a dollar.
That is so interesting. Yes.
What's interesting?
I found that interesting because I feel like that's our life. I feel like you're talking about our family for a second there. It's very interesting. That's why it's interesting.
It's painful because I'm going through this situation right now and I created all this wealth and it's not only just the wealth you want to pass over, like you said. What's the difference between wealth transfer and legacy planning? I love the question. I saw that. I'm like, I never really thought about it until I started writing about it myself because we think about our legacy. Is it a financial legacy? I love to leave a financial legacy. I'd like to teach my kids to be better stewards of money, but I'd also like to pass on the values that we built around the family, the core values and the mission statement. I'd like to have them transferred over to them, and I'd like to have their kids or my grandkids say, hey, Grandpa helped us out. He put some money away for college so I can go for college. I don't have to start, that kind of stuff. So in your opinion, what is the difference between the both of those?
That's such a great question. One, you can think about it like transactional or tactical versus strategic, right? So when you think about business, right? When you're starting a business, when you want to be successful, you really come up with like, what is the mission of this? What is the purpose of this? And what is really phenomenal for people when they think about their legacy and what does this wealth mean to us? And what's the purpose of this wealth in our lives and in the lives of the people it's going to touch going forward? And is it going to be just thinking about the family and the transfer of wealth within the family generations? Or is it also about what are we building in the community or in the world that we're going to have an impact on? And so it's having a strategic plan that incorporates what the values are, like you said, and the purpose of it with whatever structures you end up building around it. And I think of like when you talk about wealth transfer, you're actually thinking about, well, what structure am I going to use? What age are people going to be when they get their money? Or what kind of stipulations am I going to put on the trust related to when somebody gets the money? Are they going to get it outright? Or is it going to be in perpetuity, right? So these kind of like detailed tactical decisions are more in the transfer conversation versus the legacy one.
So would you say, I'm just writing a book right now. I launched it a couple months ago. It's called Happy Money, Happy Family, Happy Legacy. And I'm becoming becoming a money coach myself. So you would call that more of a legacy transfer, because what my goal is to teach my children this and to really influence a lot of other people's lives around money and the traumas they've had around money, and having those discussions. And it's almost as if I don't need to do it because I've got more than enough money that I've made in other areas, but this is something that I love. This is my passion. This is what I want to, carry over into the next generation. So you would put that in the box of legacy, correct? Instead of wealth transfer, correct?
I think so. Yeah. And I think, I don't think about one being mutually exclusive from the other. It's like if somebody's thinking about, wow, I would have significant wealth and I need to think about how to most mindfully and intentionally transfer it. The place you want to start is that legacy that you're talking about. You kind of start with that end in mind. And it's such a beautiful thing that you're doing that, because that is going to be your legacy, and it's going to touch so many more people than just your family. And, as opposed to, sitting down and getting to brass tacks about, am I going to do a slat or am I going to do a crut? Or, there's when I wrote estate planning for the blended family with L. Paul Hood, it was hilarious because there's so many different acronyms for different trusts you can use. I'm like, we need to have some sort of key here, and we need to have some sort of way for people to say, if I'm this, then this, as opposed to reading them all and deciding which one. Like, if you start with the end in mind, then you have a better sense of which vehicle you want to use.
I love that. You said start with the end in mind. If I'm a young couple listening to this, a young Julia and Gino, can you picture that, right? Years and years ago, we just started out. We're just like, I don't know where to start. Where should they start? At the very least, should they start with a will? Should they start with, the basic tenets of estate planning? Even they might have one or two assets. The question would be like, when should you start? I mean, should you start as soon as possible? And if it's too late, some people are like, it's too late. I'm too late. What's the process look like to you as far as just engaging with a couple?
Okay, so first of all, it's never too late unless somebody's passed away. Right. So there's always start today if you're worried about it being too late. And the other, first, where to start, when you said couple, I'm going to say prenup. And you want to start before you even get married. Right. You can have some phenomenal conversations about what you want your marriage to be like and what you want your life to be like. And what are you going to do about all those what ifs? So I like changing the whole dynamic around prenups, because it's like, what? Prenup? You're planning for divorce? It's like, no, you're entering into a significant contract, like probably the most meaningful contract you're going to enter into your entire life, your marriage contract. It's a legally binding contract. And right now, the state that you're getting married in determines what your exit strategy is when this partnership ends. And it's going to end. You just don't know when or how. It's not just about divorce. It's also about death. It can be, you can even think about disability if somebody's not able to work or generate income anymore. And it's an amazing opportunity to have some very important, real conversations and develop your muscle for having those hard conversations together as a couple. And better to do it before you get married, so you really understand where you are on the same page and where you might not be. Because there can be a lot of unspoken expectations and there can be a lot of misunderstandings that cause a lot of mischief in relationships. And better to do it beforehand. And I'm not saying everybody needs to have a prenup. I'm saying everybody needs to do that conversation. And if you are married and you haven't done it, there's still something called a postnup. You can still look at, what goes into a prenup, and you can do it as a postnuptial arrangement if you're married, but you didn't do that ahead of time. And you can think about, how do we want to think about what we own together, what we brought to the relationship separately, what we want to commingle, what needs to stay apart. And it's just so important for your relationship to know how to do that well and to actually have a chance to talk about those things before somebody passes away, gets sick, or divorce is imminent.
Well, Emily, I'm going to take you back to a young Gino. If I had heard this when I was a young Gino, I'd be like, I don't believe any of this prenup stuff, right, Julia? I would have been so foreign to me, even thinking about this or talking about this when I was younger. Because I saw in your book, there's only like 5 or 10% of people that actually have prenups, correct?
Yeah, it's not a common thing, but it's something that I've worked with so many families, right? I've been doing this for 20 years. And when I go in and I start working with a family, I interview everyone. I interview the spouses of the people that are part of this intergenerational wealth. And the number one pain point that I heard more than anything else was how the prenup was handled. And the lingering resentment and hurt as a result of that is something that I thought, I can do something about. Like, there's a lot in this world I can't do anything about, but this is something I can really have a difference in. And how we go about having that conversation dramatically impacts the quality of the marriage and the relationship with the family.
Give us an idea or example of the misconception then of a prenup from what we, years ago compared to what it is in your eyes.
Yeah, I think it's that idea of what we don't need that. We don't have any money yet, or oh, we don't need that because we're not going to get divorced, or and it's again, it's like, well, if you were going to enter into a business partnership, wouldn't you want to have a partnership agreement? And part of that partnership agreement has what the exit strategy is ahead of time, so that you do it while you are totally in love, while you totally respect each other, and then if heaven forbid something happens and it's no longer the right thing to be in the partnership together, you've already decided from a very respectful and honoring place what should happen, as opposed to when there might be hurt and animosity and other things that might get in the way. And it creates this really wonderful foundation for the marriage when you've had a chance to really dive into these conversations together.
Have you ever thought of that? I've never, well, until when I saw your book, and when I started reading it, I had never thought about the prenup. I had never come on my radar. As far as a lot of the blended families, do a lot of blended families end up using prenups? I
think that would be, so I'm assuming, Emily, that would be more common in a sense because you have two families
coming in
with children.
Yeah.
And then if I pass away, your children aren't getting,
Yeah, yes, yeah. I do.
Yeah, there's so much at play because you're getting somebody in the relationship's getting married for a second time or third time, right? Maybe the other person is their first relationship. And it's so essential to have these conversations because of the expectations, right? Like, who's going to be paying for what? And what does this mean in terms of us and our future? And are we going to have kids together? And what do we get to share there or not? And it's so important for couples especially because there's past hurts. If it's because of a divorce, they've already gone through some painful financial things as a result of that. If they had a prenup in the past, they might be like, well, I've learned a lot from having that. Or if they didn't have one, it's like, oh, I was told it's a really good idea to have it. And I'll say the other misconception is people take it really personally, right? Like, oh, you don't trust me. And I want to also turn that one around because it's not about whether somebody trusts you or not. It's about respecting you enough to say, I want to take the time and then put the energy into finding out what we're both thinking about in terms of this marriage when it comes to our finances and our assets, and making sure we're on the same page. And the person who has more money and more resources coming into the marriage, and if somebody comes in with more debt, it's like there can be a real power differential and one down. And this is a great way to look at, where are we on the same page? Where are we equal? How are we going to pool resources together in a way that's fair? So that sort of thing. And it's a huge difference in blended families in particular.
As you're saying that, I'm trying to think of now the generation now that they have a lot of student debt, and that may be a big thing coming in. And I'm just trying to think of back when we got married. It was a little bit different when we got married. Remember, we just came in. We really didn't have that much.
We only had the cable bill.
That's it. We didn't have very many. We had a cable bill. We didn't have cell phones at the time. We had nothing back then. And it's very interesting. It's true that conversation is so important, because I think each side, and I've learned this over the years about the relationship with money. We each have a different relationship with money, and we each have a different background with money. I was more of the saver, immigrant style, and my wife had a different. Well, why don't you share your view of money? What did you think about money when we got married?
Well, I didn't give too much thought about it. But I wasn't a spender.
You weren't a spender, but it was my way every week hour.
I put it all on you. How's that?
Yes.
I put everything on you to figure out. But I trusted you.
I know that. No, I know. That's the conversation that you need to have. And it took us years and years and years to have that conversation. So for anybody listening to this right now, after you're done listening to us, just sit down, find your spouse, your significant other, and start having the conversation. Because when you argue about money, it's not that I didn't want to provide for my wife. It's that I just didn't want her, quote unquote, overspend because I was afraid of not having money saved.
The funny thing is, I wasn't an overspender.
I know you weren't.
So that was your worry.
Yes, but I wish I could have told you that at the time. Because like, do I need to buy organic muffins? Like, why organic? But now I look back, I'm like, that was silly. It was a silly argument to have, because obviously
we have a good story, though.
Yeah, we want longevity of your health and all, but at the time you're caught up in the daily minutia. You're really emotional about something, and you're afraid about going to work every week, not making enough money, and then having a $5,000 dental bill pop up and go, I got to pay for that now? I had that money saved to do a deal kind of thing. I'm trying to save and invest in the future. And I guess the long story short is just have the conversation and see where your spouse is and try to communicate and try to find common ground. Because one more thing, Emily, before I let you take it. I always had the picture of becoming financially free. I wanted to become financially free. My wife didn't know what that meant. Like, she's like, we have enough money. I'm like, no, I want to make enough income from my investments to be able to say my bills are paid for. Once I communicated that to her and I said, this is why I want to do that, to be able to go find something that I'm really passionate about, to be able to help others, to be able to build wealth, to be able to build this kind of life. All of a sudden, she just sort of bought in and she was like, oh, that makes sense now. Why didn't you tell me? I'm like, I'm trying to tell you, but I'm not really that good at communicating.
Well, you just weren't speaking my language. It's like me going to Italy and saying, okay, Julia, have fun.
She said France. She said France, okay?
Changed it for yourself.
Italy's good. Yeah. Well, it's interesting because I wrote the Beginner's Guide to Purposeful Prenups for that very reason, because it's just a little booklet, right? It's like taking on this big topic, but it's not a long little book. It's meant to help you get started with the conversation. And there's not a lot of technical stuff in this book. It's the Beginner's Guide. It's about how do you have these conversations, looking at your values, looking at those past money stories, looking at what your personality is and temperament is around money. And then, how do we trust each other, and where might there be breakdowns in trust, and how do we need to relate to that? And that's where you want to start. So I wouldn't say jump into the conversation if you haven't had good experiences in the past, because you don't want it to go badly.
My husband is so excited for people to jump into the conversation.
I know. It's so good.
About just sit and do something really nice for your spouse before you jump into the conversation. Make some tea at night.
Yes, and tea. Tea is good. I would say avoid alcohol in the conversation. Right. Maybe have a drink afterwards. Especially if you and I do a lot with emotional regulation. So if somebody has a lot of anxiety talking about money, or they haven't had things go well and it becomes pretty conflictual, it's how to learn how to regulate your inner world, right? So that you have the sense of, I'm totally safe and this isn't going to destroy me or the marriage, and we can get through this. And it takes a lot, but it's like having a good experience with your breath and, regulating your internal state so that you can be present with your partner. And the other thing I will say is, if you're going to jump in, which is fine, if you really want to do that, and it's not going well, give it a pause and give each other permission at any time. If either one of you is uncomfortable with the conversation or where it's going, to pause it and then look at when you can come back to it, get your calendars out, reschedule it, and then maybe do some other things first to get ready for it. Maybe instead of talking about, the last bill and, overspending or why organic, it's more about, tell me about your childhood and your first memory around money. Let me know a little bit about your experience with that. One example I love is, I love that you're getting trained as a coach. I have a certification in money coaching from the Money Coaching Institute. And it was in that training that I learned that almost every single person has some sort of story as in their childhood of having taken money or taken something from a store. Or it's that's part of our development in terms of trying to understand how to relate to money, and how that is handled by the adults in your life when they find out you've done it has a dramatic impact on how you're meaning about money and you're thinking about money. And everybody has memories and stories of the first time they were either corrected about something they did with money, or they watched their parents arguing about money, or they saw somebody doing something with money. And so you really want to be curious on all those levels. What's the first thing you remember hearing? Or what's a memory you have about money that had an impact on you? And that's a good place to start.
Awesome conversations to have with your spouse, because there's so many that come up throughout the conversation. I actually just had a memory of when I used to work at the restaurant. I used to get tips, which were cash, and they were in every single pocket.
It was so annoying, Emily. The money was everywhere. It was scattered all about, and I'm like,
you would get so
I get so mad. I'm like, don't you respect that money? It's all over the place. Can you please put it in one place and not lose your $20 bill?
You know where it is.
Drive me nuts. Yeah. It drive me nuts. But you said something very profound that I don't really want to gloss over. You may not know that it was that profound, but to me, I think it is. It's when you're having an argument with your significant other or with anybody, have the awareness to stop for a second, check yourself. And if you don't have a proper response, just walk away and let it simmer. Let it sit for a little while. And then your rational...
say something first.
Huh? Well, let's say we have an argument. Me and you have an argument. And I'm like, okay. And then I can go back and say most of the time it's because we got into that argument, or I thought it was a lot worse because I overreacted and my emotional brain took over and I couldn't think rationally or clearly. Right. What you said, which I 100% agree, walk away. Yeah. If you've got the text and you're arguing with somebody, just shut the text off. Don't respond to the text. Right. Don't respond to the email. Don't call. Let it sit. And maybe the next day when you look at it with a fresh, open mind, especially when it's in the morning, when you're not as emotionally drained and you can think clearly, you'll have a much better response. You'll have a much better way to create a plan to attack that quote unquote problem. And it won't even seem like that big of a problem if you do that.
Yeah, that's so key. And I will say something about texting because I've seen this so often. If you get a text message that lights you up, right? You feel that shot up your spine, or the only thing you should text back is, this is really important and we definitely need to talk about it. And you look at your calendar and you say, hey, I can do it like tonight after dinner, or I can have this conversation with you tomorrow morning before we go to work, or let's take a walk before dinner and have this conversation, but don't respond to it. And if it's something that they need an answer right away, it's like, I'm in a meeting, or I need time to think about this. Let me get back to you. And can I get back to you in 30 minutes? So it's like commit to having the conversation is a huge way to create that space. Don't use texting to have any kind of conversation that has an emotional component to it. Texting is great for coordinating action together. Hey, are you going to pick up the kids? Am I going to pick up the kids? Are you going to pick up the dry cleaning on the way home? Like, seriously, just to have, arranging your errands, your day, but not having conversations. It's just not a good milieu to have that, especially when they're emotionally loaded.
No, 100%. And also on being the other person in the conversation. That's something important, is let the person take a break. And I think that's important.
Yes.
A lot of times you're like, no, come back here. Don't leave. Don't walk away. And so we get into that defensive. You're walking away from the conversation. You're walking away from me in this situation. If you see your spouse or your child, whoever it is, upset and emotional, give them some space. And I think that's important. We forget to talk about that other person in the room. Sometimes we're always like, just take a break, walk away and think about it, but allow the other person as much time as they need.
And I love how you said, you're not just to walk away, right? You have to tell them. It's taking that moment. And sometimes it's hard to find words. Like sometimes you talk about blinding rage, right? You just need to take a breath and be like, we need to stop this now, but we're going to get back to it. And it's that part that makes the biggest difference. And also looking at your beloved partner, tapping into how much you love them and say, this is too important to continue to have in this vein. We need either help with this or we need to come back to it when we're in a better state. And if somebody brings up something when they have been drinking, or before you've had your cup of coffee, whatever it might be, it's like you have every right to say, right conversation, wrong timing. I want to make sure we have the right conversation at the right time. And you can also take it on you too and say, look, I know that I put this off. I know it's important. So let's make sure we schedule it and have it happen. So you take responsibility.
Do you think this would be a good conversation with someone like you or with a professional? Because let's say we're starting out and we have differing views. Wouldn't it be better to have somebody who's objective, who's not attached to the outcome and just listening and offering, I don't want to say advice, but guiding the conversation? I mean, that sounds exactly what your skill level and skill set would be to help couples out that are having those situations, correct?
Oh yeah, that's what I love. That's the work I absolutely love doing. I'm working with a couple right now. They just got engaged. They're so excited about getting married. And, as much as you're planning your wedding and you're putting all this effort into the wedding planning, it's like, well, let's make sure you're scheduling time for the relationship and the marriage. And having that opportunity to learn more about each other, your values, your different approaches and your expectations, so that there is this way of building your skills around having those conversations and having them go well. And that's what I do. I'm like a trainer of excellent communication and trust within relationships and families.
I love that.
Emily, I want to go, we're talking about marriage and obviously children come next. So preparing children to be good stewards of money.
It's so important to really meet the children where they are and their interests. Like the biggest thing I see is children will be really curious and inquisitive from a young age, and the parents will be so uncomfortable with the questions, not knowing how to answer them, that the children end up getting the message, verbally or non-verbally, that it's not okay to be curious or interested. So one of the best things you can do is from a very young age. I mean, I did a course on Philanthropy Begins at 5, right? You can do so much from about age 5 for children to really build their confidence and curiosity around money in a way that you cultivate it as opposed to shutting it down. And there's so many different ways to do it based on your life and your lifestyle and what matters to you. I often recommend that parents to use teachable moments and tie values to your, whatever you're doing. Like, we buy organic and it's more expensive. And as a result, we're not buying a lot of junk. So where other families, their cupboards filled with money they spent on junk food, we're choosing to spend more on high quality food. So we might not have as much in the cupboard, but what we have is really good. So like that kind of thing. Or when they're starting to learn math, it's really fun in the store to have them look at the size and shape of the container and then look at how much you're actually paying for each ounce or each pound, whatever it might be. So yeah, the unit pricing and having them compare it and like really seeing how they get to, and it's like, look how they trick you. Like that box looks so much bigger, but look at the difference, and it's like, it's so interesting because then they start to have critical thinking about it. So those are little things. And then as they get older and they have more interest or curiosity, it's like, what's the next level of training you're ready for? And really exploring with them what they're interested in about money and how you want to support them in that. And I'm working with a family right now and their son's graduating from college. They've had 2 daughters graduate. They bought each of the daughters nice cars when they graduated, and he's wanting a car that's like at a whole other strata. And while they could afford it ostensibly, it's like, no. And the parents had, and it said, oh, this is a values thing. This has to do with identity and values. So let's get really clear about that. My coaching to them was, it's really important to get curious with him first about why that particular car matters so much to him. What does that mean to him? His identity? What does he think about people who drive that kind of car? And then if he's really, dead set again on having it and they're dead set against it, it's like, where can they have a meeting of the minds? What's the amount that they're ready to pay for a car? What's the difference? Is he going to be able to put in the difference? Are they okay with him doing that? And then who's covering the insurance and the upkeep and maintenance of a high performance vehicle that's much more expensive? And so they were so empowered as parents to start having a much more rich conversation with him around how he's going to make significant financial decisions in his life, about his identity too.
Because I love the fact that you pinpointed the issue. It wasn't about, first you think the girls don't care so much about cars and the guys do, but at the same time, it was a values issue. And so that is brilliant. And I love the fact that the parents actually are going to have that conversation instead of just getting irritated. We had a spoiled kid here. You know how a lot of people just get worked up emotionally, but then you're having a really great conversation.
You keep looking at me about the car. I'd want the BMW. You understand I'm in my 20s. I'm like, Mom, I want a nice car. So I get that.
My girls are like, whatever.
The question here is, I love this question. What strategies do you recommend for building trust across generations? Because that leads into the conversation you just had with the couple and the son about wanting the expensive car.
Yeah. Well, trust is an assessment we're making all the time about the person that we're relating with. And there's 4 distinctions that people use when they're assessing whether they can trust somebody. And it's, are they being sincere? Are they reliable? Are they competent? And it's all wrapped up in care. Do they care about what I care about? So what happened with the parents was they cared about something really important that they hadn't even articulated for themselves, that they needed to clarify for themselves first before they could talk to him about how he was, like, in a strange way, breaking their trust by just wanting something that was out of what they thought they were comfortable with. So that's, and then they had to really look at competence. Does he have the competency to afford and maintain and also have that identity in the world of driving that kind of vehicle?
That's awesome. I never thought about this. Sincere, reliability, competency,
and care. Put a big heart around it. Like, care is the heart that goes around the whole thing. Yeah.
See, that's why I never worried about money.
Why?
Because those are all you. I never had to.
But I'll tell you.
You give me a big.
And then Michael, we have one boy, and he's probably in charge of all the money later. And I don't worry again.
Well, he will be. But then I've got my daughters, and it's interesting because the daughters, they don't get their identity from money, but they all have little businesses, and they all really responsible with money. And I'm just trying to figure out the piece that, as I'm not here anymore, how do I leave it to them? How do I make them become financial stewards? How do they say to themselves, "Oh, I don't got to work anymore"? Like you said, Warren Buffett's kids didn't get his billions. They got enough to make their lives comfortable, but not yet to the point where they're going to sit home and not be participants in the economy or in the world where they can create value. So that's like the hardest piece right now of that component of trying to create the handoff, as we like to say, as I like to say.
Well, yeah. And you have to have some conversations with the kids too, right? Like, where are they at and what are they thinking? And what are their aspirations for the future? And what have you already said or promised that they're relying on or anticipating? Like down payment on a home, paying for health stuff. Like there's different ways that parents have already kind of set up expectations. So you want to kind of find what that is first. And then you really want to start that narrative within the family around what does this mean for us? And what is the purpose of this? We've worked really hard to get here. It's quite astonishing what has been created as a result of our hard work. Hard work and work ethic is a really strong value that we obviously have because look where we are, as is family. And as is, having really solid relationships and communication in the family, right? So you promote that and then you look at what is this? What do we want as a family? Like if you all have how many children, did you say?
6.
You have 6? So if each of those 6 kids has 6 kids, right? What needs to happen with this wealth that you've accumulated to make it so that all those family members get to benefit on some level? Well, it means not living off of it. It means everybody getting to have their lives enhanced a little bit, but it means being good stewards. And what is a good steward? Like, that's such a bizarre word because how often do we actually use that? And it's like, what does that actually mean to us? And what would be behaviors that would represent that? And what would be behaviors that wouldn't? And giving examples from pop culture or from your life. Everybody's got like their cousin that blew all their, money or inheritance. There's something. So you can like point to things that they're aware of and also ask them for examples. Like who do they emulate or who do they respect or who do they, and it's also great to find out like what are the influencers that they're watching and why do they like them and what's the story that person's selling, right? So that's an important thing too. And just, making sure that your values are what they're grounded in.
I agree with that.
Emily, where can the listeners get a hold of you? Where can they buy your books? Where they can, website, anywhere we can direct them to get more information or work with you?
Oh, thank you. My website's emilybouchard.com. I just wanted to be easy for people to find me. And they can also go and find me on LinkedIn, and everything that they would want to know about is right there.
It's interesting because the conversation started and I'm like, okay, this is great, but 40 minutes have flown by on this topic and it's gone so quick. And I want people to continue the conversation with you because this is an important topic. I think something where people can step outside the box. If you've got certain assets and you've never really talked about it and you're feeling the pressure of, am I doing the right thing? How can I have a conversation with my kids? I've never done that before. I think you're a great resource for them. Any final words for you?
No, it's funny because the same thing. I came into this conversation. I'm like, all right.
You don't trust me. You trust me about the money, but not about the conversation.
But it's such a good conversation. And I think, looking back, you never, and I'm not going to say worry, but you never stop thinking about money, right? You get into a relationship, it's the thought about, you have children, another one. It's a stress on somebody. But then now it's like, oh my gosh, my kids are going to get married and I don't know their spouses yet. We haven't met them yet. And we don't know who their children are. It's amazing what, you can't prepare for the future.
Are you trying to make me sweat even more? I've having a good time. You're making me think of all these other people I never had yet.
But I think that's so.
But you have to let go.
Yeah, it's so thoughtful, though. I have to say, to realize, and it goes back to what you were saying, Gino, and what you're writing about, right? You're thinking about your legacy that's going to touch the lives of people you're never going to meet. Right? Like that's an extraordinary thing to think about. Your kids, hopefully you'll meet their spouses and their kids, but then their kids are going to have kids and then their kids and it's like, wow, there's a chance to really infuse this amazing wealth you've accumulated with your values in a way where you get to live on in them in so many different ways and what that means to them. And then I do want to end with saying, Julia, how it's been so fun having to talk to both of you and how you keep turning to Gino and you're like, oh yeah, I trusted you and you get the money. And it's like the incredible sensitivity and vulnerability you have. If something were to happen to him is another reason why he feels so much pressure in terms of how do I set this up? But it's also about your feeling confident and competent with your financial life side by side with him. So I definitely love empowering couples. So even if somebody's not interested and there's total trust in the other partner to do it all, it's like, and let's make sure that when you guys go into your quarterly meetings, you understand what they're talking about, that you can ask questions and feel respected, that you can trust these advisors to work with you, right? So I think that's so important. I mean, definitely love having somebody to rely on, but want to make sure you feel confident about it too.
100%. Emily, thank you for pointing that out. Because that was me in the beginning of our marriage. Absolutely. You pinpointed it. It was the uncomfortableness of money for me that I'm like, oh, I don't even have to worry about it. But now obviously it's different. After 26 years of being married, it's interesting. A lot of people I know do what I used to do, which is a lot of pressure. A lot of pressure. And it definitely caused a lot of your anxiety.
Yes.
It's okay. You caused me some anxiety.
Go to emilybouchard.com to learn more, to learn how to work with Emily. And what I would say is if you want to learn more about the family, go to barbara360.com to learn about, family, faith, finances, and wellness and nutrition. And we just want to thank you for spending a few minutes of your day. We know how valuable your time is. Start the conversation with your spouse, with your significant other. And more importantly, if you have children, start that conversation. Be open, honest, transparent. Let them know that money is important. It's not the most important thing, but it's something that's really important. And if you avoid it, that's probably the worst thing that you can do, because then you're going to have a child that grows up and that does not know how to actually deal with money. You want to avoid that. So last thing, emilybouchard.com. Go check it out. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you on next week's show.